Dio and JoJo both commit zoo sadism in this book. Poor boy is sent to live with a rich family after his father dies. He hates his father but promises to fulfill his dying wish, to become rich. With one shallow reason, lots of hate and a penchant for zoo sadism, he embarks on a revenge-filled quest to fulfill a promise to a man he hated by bullying a rich kid, assaulting a young woman, killing an old man, and setting a dog on fire. Will he win and destroy an entire family to become something he doesn't even want? Or will the beautiful gleaming light of righteousness known as JoJo prevail? That question is irrelevant as an ancient mask that's randomly inserted into the story turns him into something terrible.
But it's not randomly inserted, it's in the story from the beginning.
Yeah, it's there in the beginning, but it like randomly comes up throughout the story.
No, it doesn't. What are you talking about?
I feel like it does. Part one apparently is setting up JoJo and Dio. That's what I feel like this main story is, JoJo and Dio, right? And then the mask just feels like an add-on, which maybe it becomes relevant like later on in the series.
It really does. The mask is like the entire story. Without the mask, there would be no story.
When I did agree to read this story, you did say that reading part one of one is like...
It's not much. Like, genuinely reading just part one of part one, you're getting like maybe 1 or 2% of the story.
But I had never read manga before. So, a what?
Manga.
Oh, sorry. So I'd never read a manga before, so I didn't want to like jump in the deep end and read like all of these books because I felt like one book was good enough, and apparently it wasn't. You need to read 3 parts of a book. I started reading it, and then the first thing she said was like, "Oh, you're reading it wrong."
Because you're reading it like an American book. It's not an American book.
So you can't read it from left to right. There's so many rules with this book, so now I need to turn it this way. And that's what you told me. You were like, read it backwards, right?
Basically.
So, first page I come to is a naked lady. What filth are you reading?
She's not completely naked.
Jeez. And then so I start reading it, and then I swear, like, the first couple of pages, although I had opened the book from this way, right? I started reading from top left over, and then moving over to the next page and reading from top left down. And I was so confused as to what was happening.
Because you're supposed to read it right to left.
Yeah, but you didn't tell me that. You just told me, oh, just read it backwards. I was like, okay, I opened it backwards. And then I started reading it from top left to right. And then the story kind of made sense. But I was like, why do they always know what's going to happen before it happens? So anyways, I got over that hurdle.
Oh, that's like a reference to part 2 of JoJo, knowing what's going to happen before it happens.
See, I was reading it properly then.
No, but that's like... Never mind, it's one of the character's abilities, so never mind.
So in my intro, I had to look up a word for when somebody tortures an animal. It's apparently called zoo sadism, when you torture animals, because Dio and JoJo both commit zoo sadism in this book. He was just running up to JoJo all happily, and then he gets booted in the face.
No, Dio kicks him in the face.
Yeah, Dio kicks him in the face, and that's when I kind of knew, like, this story is going to be kind of dark.
Yeah, it does get pretty dark after a while.
So the story kind of sets up like JoJo as the heroic figure. And in the beginning of the story, he keeps getting beaten up. He gets beaten up by like random strangers, and then he gets beat up by Dio. Yeah. And I don't understand why he keeps trying to fight people after he gets beat up so many times.
Because he's trying to prove that he's a gentleman.
By fighting people? That's how you prove you're a gentleman? You're like, I will fight you even though I know I'll lose.
Well, the first time he got into a fight was to defend Arena. Because
somebody he didn't know, by the way.
Yeah, see, he's a true gentleman. He will defend any woman, even if he doesn't know them. One of my favorite scenes between Jonathan, Dio, and their dad is when they're eating at the table, and Jonathan's eating all messy, and then he spills his juice, and he's like, oops, it's so cute! It's so cute! Jonathan! And he's like so tiny, he's a little baby, and he's just eating his food, and he spills his juice, and he goes, oh no, and then his dad's like, Jonathan, how dare you! Go to your bedroom, you shall have no dinner! Like, little Jonathan is adorable. I would die for this little baby. He's so cute.
He gets super angry. They're rich. They have like people that are gonna come up and clean.
Look, he tells them.
Why is his dad so angry?
He's like, oh, the servants will take your food away. Like he's like, clear JoJo's place, and then you can see a servant walking up.
Yeah.
Like,
why couldn't that same servant just clean up the spilled juice?
No, it's about his manners. They're boorish.
Okay. There's so much to unpack in the story because so JoJo is supposed to be like a good character. But explain this scene to me. I'll show it on the screen here, but there's one I want to find where him and Irina are. Oh, maybe I have a note of it.
You took notes about the book?
Yeah, I have a lot of notes because I was just like, I gotta write this down. This is insane.
Like when I first started getting into JoJo, I was kind of like, how do people like this? This is absurd. This is insane. Like none of this makes sense. But now that I'm on like part 3 of JoJo, like this is very normal for me.
You're like, that's fairly standard. I'm okay with it. Zoo sadism, that's the new word for today.
Like a guy just like taking a cherry in his mouth and just like, playing with it, like all the saliva, and it just plops on the floor, and like that's completely normal. It's so normal. What scene are you looking for?
I'm looking for one specific scene. Hold on.
What is it?
Oh, right here. What happens in this scene? Oh, JoJo, you scoundrel. And then it looks like JoJo turns around and then slaps her in the face.
No, that's not it. It's because he carved their names into the tree and you're not supposed to do that. And she's like also a really good person. So she's like, no, JoJo, you can't carve our names into a tree.
And then he slaps her in the face?
No, he doesn't slap her. That sound effect is her turning away.
Oh, okay.
Her
she's
turning
embarrassed.
dramatically.
I see. Okay. The art is pretty good. I liked it. In the beginning, it was orange. It was like shades of orange.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But then it just completely lost it throughout the rest of the book.
A lot of manga do that. Like they'll put the first few pages or like the first chapter.
And then they'll put less
color.
effort in their story.
They'll put like the first chapter in color. And then they'll do like the rest in black and white.
I did like how, like I said, it was in orange, shades of orange, and I like that idea of just using shades of orange to color everything. But I didn't like how it just lost it throughout the rest of the story.
I think another manga I read that did that was Tokyo Ghoul.
So
yeah.
in this book, Dio is like the evil character, and he's like he tortures JoJo's dog because JoJo loves the dog.
Yeah.
He sets a dog on fire. Spoiler alert. But also, JoJo likes to engage in a little bit of zoo sadism. On page 73, it says, it's fun to tie a string around one of their feet and swing them around.
Oh,
He's talking about a frog.
The frogs.
So this boy is tying a string around frogs' feet and just whipping them around.
Didn't you do stuff like that?
What? No.
No, like with...
I didn't torture frogs when I was little. Did you torture frogs?
No, I didn't torture frogs.
What's happening? I'm learning so much about you right now.
Didn't you like tie like those beetles on a string?
Oh yeah, there's like beetles here in California. Sometimes we tied a string around beetles that like were already on the ground, you know, and those beetles have a lifespan of like 8 hours. So I mean, they're gonna die anyway.
I guess so, but like still, you're hurting animals.
I guess, but still, I didn't torture a frog. With JoJo being the beacon of righteousness throughout the story, it didn't make sense that he was torturing animals as well.
I mean, he's a kid. Like especially in that scene, he's still like what, 13 or 14?
And later in the story, we do like this huge time jump
7
where it's like 7 years later. And then apparently in that intervening 7 years, everything was fine. I think they went to college or something.
No,
they became friends.
They were graduating high school. Dio was top of his class and JoJo was an archaeologist.
They were only graduating high school? That was 7 years later.
Yeah, they were.
So
I told you they were like 12.
Those kids were like in elementary school at the beginning of the story. He looked like a full-grown man.
What do you mean?
In the beginning of the story, he looked like a full-grown man.
No, he didn't.
Look at this dude.
Not here.
Look at this dude.
Okay, this is when they're like my age. Not like my age. I'm 16, but like they were like maybe 14, 15. Something like that.
This dude is 14.
Yeah. Okay, look at them later in the book. They look so like...
JoJo does look ripped later.
Yeah,
and the author said he did do that on purpose.
Because he's trying to, make him look like he grew as a person. Stronger, better,
I guess.
Gotta beat up Dio.
Irina kind of gets the short end of the stick as well. I'm guessing she comes back later in the series, but in this one, she's like only there for a few scenes.
Yeah, she plays a huge part, especially towards the end of part 1.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah, because all she does is show up to get sexually assaulted, and then she leaves.
Yeah, no, she has like a huge part, actually.
So this is my first foray into like manga. In general, I do not like it, Sam. I am.
What? Why? It's so good.
I feel like the book feels like I'm not smart enough to understand what's happening. So it'll stop telling the story so that a thought bubble will appear and it'll tell me directly what is happening. I'm like, I got it. I know. I mean, subtle cues and all that. I get it. Like, but why do we have to stop the momentum of the story so that I can have everything broken down to me?
There are videos on YouTube where they like cut out the inner monologue of a character. And it's just that scene without the inner monologue, and it makes a huge difference. Definitely, it's way better. But like sometimes, like even in like Demon Slayer, I really like the inner monologue just because I like seeing inside of a character's head, even if they are just saying what they're doing.
Yeah, what just happened. They're summarizing what just happened, what they thought about it, and then what they're gonna do next.
Yeah. But I like that. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
I feel like it's okay as like a cheat to move the story along, because otherwise that thought bubble would have to be like a whole page of scenes, maybe of like characters moving around, and then this book would have to be twice as long. But I feel like in this one, it just seems so elementary how they executed it. You know what I mean? Like they just straight up stopped it and just straight up told you what was going on. I got another note. Hold on.
Oh my god, why do you have so many? It's not that bad.
Oh, so page 24. Let me see. Hold on. Page 24. The whole premise of Dio wanting to become rich because his dead father, who he hated, wanted him to be rich.
Yeah.
The man spits on his father's grave and then says, "Don't worry, I'm going to fulfill your dream of being rich."
Yeah.
What?
But it's
Why would
also
you
like...
fulfill the dream of a dead man you hated?
I guess it's also in spite of his father, right? Like, I'm going to do what you couldn't do.
And then he meets JoJo and he's like, although I want to be rich, I hate rich people.
Yeah, right?
What?
They're snobby and annoying, right?
I guess.
That's how he sees them.
Oh man. And the fighting scenes in this story.
Wait, which one? There's like 5.
Exactly. They randomly happen.
Yeah.
So JoJo gets beat up in the beginning by some randos.
Yeah.
And then he decides to enter a boxing match later. Obviously not having any boxing skills, and then gets demolished by Dio.
Yeah.
Like, I understand you don't have any fighting skills, but why then enter a boxing match?
Maybe he was trying to build up the skills, right?
I
Right?
guess, but
You gotta
that would be at a
start
boxing
somewhere.
gym, not at a competition.
But this is like, what, 1880? Do they have boxing gyms?
So, no gym needed, straight to competition.
Yeah. But like, it's not like they were like serious competitions. It was just like in the middle of the town, like a bunch of people just like punching each other.
Just a bunch of people randomly in town just punching
I mean,
everybody.
obviously they had rules, but you know,
Yeah.
like, who cares?
Yeah, there's rules to just randomly punching people.
Yeah, there are.
You can't just, have chaos when you're randomly punching
Doesn't
people.
he say like, oh, you can't punch him in the face?
Oh
something
yeah,
like
there's
that?
some weird rules like that. Like you
can't
punch them in the face. So it's just body shots or something like that.
But then like Dio punches him in the face. I think. I don't really remember that scene too well.
Yeah, and everybody's fine with it, apparently.
Yeah, nobody cares. They just want drama, Dad.
And then, oh man, when Dio like just straight up sexually assaulted Arena, he was like, I kissed you first, and even though I forced you, that don't really matter. And then he slaps her for good measure.
Yeah. You know what's funny is that scene is so iconic in JoJo. That's like one of the most like iconic scenes. The shirt I have that I told you about, the Dio shirt.
Oh, you got a shirt about this iconic sexual assault moment.
Yeah, it's him and he's saying, where he's like, you thought your first kiss would be with JoJo, but it was me, Dio. It's that scene.
This whole book is basically just him doing terrible things, and then JoJo just kind of like taking it.
That's literally the entire series.
Yeah. I also don't like some of the dialogue in here. It is rough to take.
Like what?
Was this written like in another language first?
Yeah, it was written in
And there
Japanese.
was, okay, so that, I guess we can kind of forgive some of the language.
Like translation errors.
Yeah, but some of it is pretty rough. There's one specifically. They're fighting near the end. He goes to like this bad part of town. He's fighting some dudes. The bad guy says, "This kick will give you a taste of my legendary Chinese martial arts." What? He stops attacking JoJo and then says, "This kick will give you a taste of my legendary Chinese martial arts." Why does it have to be Chinese? Why is he so specific? Why not just say martial art? But also, why announce your attack to begin with?
Dad, you're gonna hate literally every part of JoJo because in part 3, when people start fighting, the moment they walk up to each other, they start with, here's my stand, here's what it can do, now let's fight.
So they have like an announcement first?
They have like
here's my disclaimer, here's my small print. Please sign that before we start because I don't want to get sued after I murder you.
They have like a 5-minute scene where they just talk about each other's stands and what they can do.
So the other fantastic piece of dialogue, and then I think it was in that same scene actually, it says, "Why didn't you kick me with all you had? A leg like yours would have done a number on my face." What?
Because his leg is
He just really loved his leg.
he's so beefy.
I know, he's like, look at that leg. Jesus, it's so great.
I mean, look at his
I can't wait
thighs.
for that leg to kick me. And then it kicks me. He's like, wait a minute. You didn't use all your force. What's this? I'm sitting here loving your leg and then you kick me with it. It doesn't even hurt that bad.
Yeah.
And he's like, nah, I got you, bro. I'm kind of a good dude.
Yeah, he's nice. He's a nice guy.
It took a lot for me to absorb this. I read like 2 chapters. I was like, okay, what just happened?
Yeah. Okay, but in part 1, the only characters that matter are obviously JoJo and Dio, and then Arena. and Speedwagon. And obviously more come in part 2 and part 3 of part 1, but like they're just trying to set up the story for now. Since you're already overwhelmed, I'm pretty sure you don't need more characters coming in. But there are like huge characters that come in later on.
Yeah.
That like change everything for his family line completely.
For
like,
JoJo's family?
Yeah, if it wasn't for one guy, Dad. One guy.
And then he finds out the mask, and then he just tells you up front in like 3 pieces of dialogue. He's like, this mask awakens latent abilities in your brain. That's it. Cut to him using it to murder people.
Wait, they don't talk about what he does with it in the part 1, right? He just puts it on and then it ends?
Well, he puts it on one dude, turns him like into like a vampire zombie.
Yeah, they're vampires.
And then he like dies from like the sun or something. And then Dio's like, that's interesting. And then he takes it. He's like, the next thing I'm going to do with it is murder JoJo.
Yeah.
That's like his greatest idea. He almost gets murdered by a vampire zombie dude. And then he's like, I'm going to murder Dio with this thing.
JoJo.
Or JoJo with this thing. That's like all he ever thinks about. This is a one-dimensional character with one thing on his mind. He wants to ruin JoJo. And then JoJo finds like a friend at the end. Randomly, again, in the slums.
Speedwagon?
Yeah,
Speedwagon is my favorite JoJo character to ever exist.
And there's no cool reveal to his name at all. He just kind of like announces it as soon as we see him on page. He's like, Speedwagon. I'm like, oh, let me guess. That dude's name is Speedwagon.
I love him so much. He's so useless, but like, I love him, okay?
So he shows up randomly, and then he starts following JoJo around, and then he's like the crux of the climax, where once again, JoJo's like, dude, Dio, I trust you. You know, let's work this out. I'm going to let you turn yourself into the cops. Yeah. And then Speedwagon's like, I don't know about that. We should probably just turn him into the cops, man. I mean, considering his history on backstabbing you every single time. And then JoJo's like, all right, I guess.
But like, that's the whole thing.
And then Dio at the end is like, but come here, JoJo. Come here, let me whisper something to you. And then JoJo, knowing this man is a murderer, he was about to kill his own father, he murdered his dog, he kissed his girlfriend against her will. He's like, all right, come whisper something in my ear really quick. He's totally fine with it. And guess what? The mask pops out and he puts it on. He's like, ah!
Yeah. Fun fact. That's not the worst thing Dio's done. Okay, so from the characters you met, rank them. Like, 1 being your favorite, and then the bottom being your least favorite.
My favorite is probably the dog.
The dog? Why?
He's number 1.
He means nothing in this story.
He has, the dog throughout this whole story has the best story arc.
How?
Right? So we meet him, he gets booted in the face by Dio, number 1. Sad beginning to his life. But then he also has a backstory. You find out that he was introduced to JoJo, right? And then he was kind of like mad, and they had to work some of their aggression out.
He had unrequited love.
Exactly. And then they had like a good friendship after that, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, that's his backstory. It's fantastic. They're best friends, but now he's got to help him like fight off Dio. But then he gets burned alive. Spoiler alert. So out of all the characters in part 1 of 1, the dog is by far the best character.
So you think he's the real hero? You think this should be JoJo's Dog's Bizarre Adventure?
Yeah. His name's Danny, right?
Yeah. Danny's Bizarre Adventure.
I know what you're trying to say. You want JoJo and Dio to be in the top 3, but because they're so like one-dimensional, I don't find them that interesting.
So you're saying that when Araki writes side characters, they're better than the main characters?
Yeah, they're at least more interesting. Because again, like Dio, he's out for vengeance. He's just a bad dude. To bring down JoJo for no good reason. And I say no good reason because he doesn't even want to be rich. And he hates his father. And he made a promise to a man that he hates.
There's a scene where he's like laying on the bed or something. And we get a flashback to like his dad. He's trying to give him medicine, and his dad's like, no, I don't want the stupid medicine. Go buy me booze. And he's like, sell your mother's dress to get me the booze. Yeah. And he like breaks down in tears, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna kill you for this. I'm gonna make sure you suffer.
But I'm also gonna fulfill the promise I made to you to become rich.
At least my take on it is that he's not really trying to fulfill his promise to his father. He's trying to like show his father that like he's better than him and he can do what he couldn't ever do. I think you need to keep reading because he gets better. And he changes. He grows. He becomes a man.
I didn't know what was happening most of the time, and then when I started getting a grasp of what was happening, I was like, why?
Yeah. But it's so cool.